Divinia, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Hope. So my name is Divinia Jithoo. I'm from the Durban University of Technology, and I work in the International Education and Partnerships Office, and we drive COIL and virtual engagement throughout our university. At Durban University of Technology, we have been practicing COIL and virtual engagement essentially since 2014. We were actually the first in Africa to take on this practice. And so the rapid move into the virtual space was a bit easier than others in the sector, but still not without challenges of doing so in a developing country. In South Africa as a whole, the concept had been discussed at various platforms and forums with the aim of gearing up to meet the demands of the fourth industrial revolution through models of blended learning. The uptake, however, pre-COVID was at a preparatory state still. Alongside this, we had the sector-wide development of legislation and national regulation at a governmental level, and this is what I'm presenting on today. So in 2013, the Department of Higher Education and Training for South Africa started engaging all South African public higher education institutions in developing a policy framework for higher education internationalization in South Africa. After identifying gaps in how this is formalized and regulated in South Africa. After a number of consultations on a draft version, the promulgation was postponed by the governmental department to account for significant global and local disruptions in the higher education system. This happened in 2017. After further engagement occurred with the different stakeholders, on November the 6th, 2020, the National Policy Framework for Internationalization in South Africa was promulgated. The framework aims to formalize and strengthen international activities in the interest of providing a diverse and transformative educational experience for local and international students, as well as international research, collaborations, and partnerships. The purpose of the framework is to guide, regulate, and support, as well as facilitate individual and collective engagements by the higher education sector on internationalization. But further to this, there's a drive to enhance development of the higher education system through internationalization. So the framework provides quite clear guidelines on the issue of joint degrees, which is something that our sector had been looking to take up. And it's now termed cross-border qualifications and programs. The framework encourages co-badged, joint and consecutive degrees and has forbidden double or dual degrees. The definitions of these are all included in the national policy framework. One issue that we have identified is that the global definitions have not been taken into account. So some other countries may define double or dual degrees differently. We have taken this up with the department, and we're seeing what we can do to update this. Next slide, please, Hope. So in terms of virtual engagement and COIL, after the postponement of the draft of the promulgation of this policy, we as the sector were expecting the final draft to include what internationalization of higher education means in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. However, the virtual world has largely been left out. And in an article, Prof. Ilva Rodney-Gumede, who is the director of the Division of Internationalization at the University of Johannesburg, she says in an article published after the policy framework was promulgated that the policy does not address the context of virtuality and the need for innovation in higher education. At an institution like DUT, for example, where the focus is mainly on curriculum transformation through internationalization and decolonization, This is a gap we would like to see addressed in terms of how to strengthen our current models of internationalization through virtuality and ICT development. Last year in November, we launched COIL at DUT at a wide-scale virtual event. Here we received national support for this endeavor, and the concept is being promoted for national uptake through the International Education Association of South Africa. And in Africa, the African Network for International Education is actively promoting this as well. Prof. Rodney Gumede goes on to say in our article that the policy framework is needing guidelines for ICT in the advancing internationalization and support for the development of new collaborative platforms for research, teaching, and learning. But further to this, in a country like South Africa, in responding to our new normal, and even before that, in responding to the fourth industrial revolution, we need support for student access and inclusion from the government. So in terms of shortfalls, what we've seen is, in terms of funding, this is always going to be a challenge for us. And to take virtual engagement and COIL to scale at South African institutions, we need investment from government into advancing ICT and access for students. Also, another shortfall is cascading organizational policies. We must make sure that the national organizations that aim to advance higher education in South Africa and Africa take the need for internationalization into account. For example, the Department of Higher Education and Training Strategic Plan for 2020 to 2025 does not mention internationalization at all, despite having promulgated a national policy framework for internationalization. In addition, the National Research Foundation funding policy for postgraduate research speaks to the importance of internationalization, and we were quite happy to see this. But then in the next paragraph, it says that universities must fund this themselves. And lastly, I've spoke about this before, the global definitions that is included in our national policy framework has not been taken into account, which limits us to our own context and goes against the principles of internationalization as well. Next slide, please, Hope. So in closing, we have seen great steps taken to support virtual engagement and COIL in our national sector. But there's still a lot more to do in terms of support from government on this. And through the IESA Forum and the African Network Forum, we'll be taking this forward as a sector so that the uptake nationally will happen much faster. I've put the link to the national policy framework on this slide, but I'll also post it in the chat for anybody who wants to read it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Divinia. And I think what you're talking about will also be part of our advocacy conversation this summer, since I think all of us hopes that something like virtual exchange will be applauded and supported on a national level. So thank you so much.